All right, peace, everybody. Dr. Ali is in the building. Thank you for your patience. And we are going to get started. Just a second. Just allow for us to set everything up. Hopefully everybody has been doing well. Some of you haven't seen me on here in quite a while, right? Working. All right, so for those of you who it's your first time here, Aboriginal Global Media, our knowledge and information coming from this particular channel is dedicated towards assisting us with dealing with the colonized mindset that many of the indigenous people across the planet have suffered from as a result of many decades and centuries of propaganda that is a necessary component of any nation that colonizes another nation to keep the integrity of its operations intact. And so we have decided tonight to discuss a very light subject and a very easy subject, and it will not take long. And that subject is, we call it the African controversy, why we must rename Africa an indigenous name. Now, this is the first of many presentations, but I wanted to start off lightly so that we could find a common ground of agreement between various groups of people who may have been and are still suffering from the onslaught of colonization. And it happens in many different ways. And possibly even when someone hears that word, they're like, colonization, what you talking about? I went to work today, I'm home, I'm watching you now, I'm not colonized. Well, after this presentation, maybe you will take another look at that. Think about that and think about how you have been educated and think about ways that we can work together to remove the adverse effects of that miseducation that has affected us both psychologically, educationally, economically, and many other different ways. Okay. All right. So I'm just setting up, guys. So just gotta let some of these programs open up. I need this. And also, if you have people who are new to the subject of indigenous knowledge and heritage and ancestry and concepts, you can share this video with them. You can even share it with children because, there won't be any inappropriate language, etc. Also, after we are done with the general concepts for the presentation, we will take questions. So you will be able to ask those particular questions directly through the chat. All right, so the ultimate issue that we have here is that we have a problem with classification. Let's call it that. All right. This problem is very prominent, and it's historical, and it's not a small issue. All right. And I'm going to use an example to start out this presentation to show you the gravity of words, right? And how we overlook the gravity, but it only takes a little bit of analysis for us to get the picture of what I'm going to present tonight. All right. And we're dealing with, when I say classification, I'm talking about how people identify themselves, the terms they use to identify themselves, where that originated at or from or who from, and how it plays out socially in society, psychologically. When you hear a word and how you feel about that word. All right. All right. So make this a little bit bigger because I'm going to share a lot of stuff from my slides and my books. And I'm going to give all the sources out that I used to create this communication. Now, the first thing I want to deal with is just terminology, right? Check this out. All right, this is from my book. If you don't have this book right here, I think you should get it. This book right here. The Lost Aboriginal Heritage of the So-Called Negro African American, Resolving a Historical, Political, and Economic Identity Crisis. All right, so the information I'm pulling from this is from this book, but of course, the primary research will be from wherever I'm citing the source. All right, and so the first thing deals with the 2010 census. Okay, now we all know that Barack Obama was the president of the United States of America. Some people argue whether he was actually an African American or not, because allegedly his father is from Kenya, so that makes him, domestic to Africa, and his mother was of European descent, American in that sense. And so with his lineage, was he really the first African American president? All right, that's another discussion. But the issue was, while he was in office, he got in office in 2008 and stayed there till 2016. While he was in office, one of his departments, and the United States Census Department is under the executive branch. One of his departments put out a census, regular census, right? And on that census, I'm going to show you what it looked like. Let's see. This is from page 14 of my book, The Lost Aboriginal Heritage. I'm going to share something with you. You should be able to see this in 1 second. All right. So if you look at this, right, this is the census, and they put terms here. You see white, you see black, African American or Negro, American Indian, Alaska Native, and then you got Asian. You got a whole bunch of stuff here, right? So I have a question. They have this word here, Negro, on the census. Now, for the 2020 census, that word will not be there, right? And if anybody knows my history, they know that back when I was doing Blog Talk Radio, I was the first one to address this issue publicly about the census and that particular term. Because I consider that term, and really all of them, derogatory, but I focused on that term. And it created a tsunami of discussion. And I have those Blog Talk Radio shows. So if you can find me someone in 2010 who was talking about the census, right? And 2011, the census, and the word Negro on radio, television, anywhere, just find it. You won't. We were the first ones on Aboriginal radio. And so the example I want to use to you to show you derogatory terms is, just picture this. Picture me, a reporter. I got my press pass and I'm about to ask a question to Barack Obama, right? And I say to Barack, how do you feel being the first Negro president? Would he feel disrespected? Right? Would he feel disrespected? Do you think that Barack Obama would feel disrespected if I asked him, how do you feel to be the first Negro president? All right. All right. And so I see somebody asking, why is my book unavailable on Amazon? Economics, Indigenous economics. I do not want my books on Amazon. All right. You want to go get my books, you can go to the websites and I'll give you those websites. As a matter of fact, I just shoot them out to you. Governmentreparations.org and aboriginalmedicalassociation.com. You can go directly to my websites. I would not sell my material to a third-party website who has no interest in the economic affairs of my family or our people. All right, so that's the indigenous economics sidebar. All right, so getting back to Barack. Of course he would feel disrespected, right? He would feel disrespected. Why would he feel disrespected? Because it has become socially unacceptable in a civilized world because of what? The sensitivity of the word Negro as it pertains to slavery and other things, to use that type of classification, right? When the term was being used in 1920 census, 1910 census, 1900 census, it wasn't a problem because it was socially acceptable to use a derogatory term from slavery to people because they were not aware of how to stand up for themselves in a unified fashion. They weren't aware, right? So over time, more knowledge comes out, more information, more unification around certain thoughts, and then it changes, right? No one would want to be called the first Negro president, and Barack Obama would not accept that, right? So here's the question. If he would not accept that, why would he allow his department to put it on the census? Think about this. Your first so-called African-American president, and he allows the Census Bureau to put Negro on the 2010 census? All right. So it's off now. 2020 census is going to be off. All right. It's not going to be there. But think about this. What if all of the terms are derogatory? Just like we found out about Negro being derogatory, what if all of those classifications are derogatory? What if calling me, somebody who looks like me, an African American is derogatory? Because I don't want to be named after a white Roman province, a white Roman goddess, all right? A term that means a troglodyte, cave-dwelling person in that time in parts of the area that we call North Africa, in Tunis and that area. Yes, I'm telling you, the word or the origin and etymology of the word Africa goes back to a white woman who was a goddess, right? I'm not white, I'm not European, I'm not Roman. A cave-dwelling person, a troglodyte, I'm definitely not a troglodyte. Right? And a jurisdiction, a small area that was captured. So the work that we're doing now in some future time period could do the same thing that happened with the term Negro. It could become something that is universally unacceptable because somebody stood up with the appropriate level of intelligence and knowledge and said, that's not how we want to classify ourselves. It is unfitting of us as indigenous people not to use our own indigenous classifications. All right? It's just that simple. And so all of these terms that foreigners have used to identify us with are not appropriate. They're not appropriate legally. They're not appropriate for history's sake. They're not appropriate for psychological state. And that those areas move over into economics and psychology of people. All right? And we're going to show you how these things are intertwined. All right. So now that's example number one. You're not a Negro. You're not African. You're not any of these things that these people are calling you, because these are all derogatory terms that they made up. Now, it's popular now to African, black, African. We're doing that now, right? We're doing that. We're doing that because we're ignorant. That's what's guiding us. Our ignorance is guiding us. And even if you have something that is tradition, is ignorant. In my family, all right, it was tradition to cook chitterlings on Thanksgiving. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. Not in my direct household, but we went to my great grandmother's house, and I used to smell the chitterlings. I never ate them. All right, my father wasn't playing that, but no, it's a tradition. It's food, right? We survived off of it, but when we get more intelligence, we're not going to offer a civilized man or woman a plate of chitterlings and say, well, at least it's food. All right? It's inappropriate food. All right? And now that we have access to better, we'll do better. So now let me show you what's better. Let's get into this presentation. All right, that's a nice little warm up. If it gets hot in the room, for anybody that's Afrocentric, please understand that you are my brother and sister, and I love you. I am not doing this presentation to mock you. I am not attempting to create greater divisions in the community. I am just presenting very precise, factual information. And then it leaves us with the opportunity, if we are willing, whichever groups are willing, to move away from calling ourselves white man, white man. That's what African American basically means. Your children are going to school and they think that they are African Americans, right? And they don't know that they're being named after Marigold Vespucci and white Roman goddess, cave dweller, general. They don't know those things, all right? So let's check this out. Let's check this out. Follow me. And if anybody can refute what I'm saying, I'm welcome to critique. I'm never above being shown that I presented something that was inaccurate. And if I present something that is inaccurate, just correct me. All right. Let's start here. Let's start here. And I will prove every point that I'm presenting. To be classified incorrectly by a colonizer who had the intent of suppressing your identity for legal and economic advantage over you as an ethnic or national group is an act of genocide. It is an act of genocide. And this is the international definition provided for genocide. And I want to focus here the causing of mental harm to members of that group. All right? And a deliberate action. All right? So let's read the whole definition of genocide just so you know it. The deliberate and systematic destruction in whole or in part of an ethnic, racial, religious, or national group. We are indigenous peoples who have been deliberately attacked and systematically destroyed when it comes to our heritage, even biologically attacked. All right? Any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. Killing members of the group. Of course, we know that's happening. By the state, not just by private citizens, but by the state. Causing serious bodily harm. Yes. All right. Serious bodily. We have the up-to-date Flint, Michigan. We don't have to go back to Tuskegee and the older things. We have very up-to-date, deliberate actions against populations of people who are primarily indigenous, or causing mental harm to members of the group. Classifying us as Negroes or Africans or just generically black, this is mental harm, and it's happening throughout state-funded institutions. Which, the reason why I'm highlighting it is because there is a political, legal, and economic remedy to this. All right? Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. We're not theorizing about these things. We can prove these things. All right? Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. We can prove that easily. All right? Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Of course, if you declassify someone, gain jurisdiction over them, then you can transfer the children from that group to another group under the guise of they have a contract with us. But that contract that they have with you is based on them being a prisoner of war, not based on them having the autonomous opportunity to know who they are, all right, and then move forward from that progression, knowing they're an indigenous group of people, to form their own communities so their children won't be transferred to DHS into other entities and foster homes. And what happens when these children, when they go to foster homes, they end up getting raped, they end up with poor, degenerate levels of education, they end up with all of these things that are not suited for a civilized society. And so we give you our source, Convention on the Prevention of Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And so, what are we saying? There is no African nationality. When brothers and sisters come here from that continent, they are Ghanaian nationality. They are Nigerian nationality. They are Senegalese nationality. They are Gambian nationality. They're from Mauritania nationality. All right? They're from Cameroon nationality. They even go further to their clans, the various clans. All right? Ashanti, Maasai, Wolof. There is no African clan. As a matter of fact, right now, let me let you see me for a minute. I gotta let you see me when I say this, because I want you to understand this clearly. And I want you to help you see how fraudulent this is. There is no unifying thing that actually makes an African, except for the fact that they are domestic to the continent, which means anybody of any shade or whatever can be African. I'll give you an example. I went to Temple University, and there was a young woman in our African American Studies class, all right? And this is back in the 90s. And her family was from South Africa. Pay attention to this now. Her family was from South Africa. Born just solely on the soil, although they are not just sanguineous by bloodline. Nationality holds both, right? Just solely and just sanguineous. Just solely means your rights to the soil because you're born in that area. Just sanguineous means you have a bloodline of history with the people who are indigenous to that area. There are no Europeans who have just sanguineous rights in South Africa. They only have just solely rights, but that is enough for them to be residents, to be domiciled there, to work, to be citizens, etc. But Sharifa was in class in African American Studies saying not only is she African, but she's African American. And I have people who went to Temple University with me who took the African American Studies classes that they had, back in the 90s. I think they still run that program. I know Malefi Asante and other people are gone, but they still have some type of Africana studies. Maybe they just switched it. It was still there. So she was saying that she was African. Now, I want you to argue with me based on international law to see whether she was African or not. She was African. She was born there on the continent. She was South African because she was a citizen or national. You see how you can get confused? That is democracy and European government style structure. And that's how they enveloped the way to develop a colony. All right. And colony comes from colon, which is Cristobal colon. Cristobal colon, known to you as who? Christopher Columbus. That wasn't his real name. His name was Cristobal colon. All right. Colony. They set up the colony, and then they get just solely rights from the first children that are born there, and then they say, we have rights to the soil. Our children were born here, and they're right. Back then, they had to get naturalized and other things, but they set up their own jurisdictions. So the point is, Sharifa, though she had pale skin and she had blonde Nordic hair, all right, she was an African, she was a South African, and because she was in America, she said in class that she was African American. All right. Listen, because y'all don't understand international law, or you need a law class, you don't understand why that is correct. All right? So now, listen. Our community needs civics classes. Our community needs history, proper history classes, civics and history, to marry them together. And then they need classes on political science so they won't be stuck in these old weird paradigms. All right? So going back to my slide, I'm going to go back to my slide. Let me get back to my slide because I don't want to lose myself inside conversation. All right? There is no African nationality. There is no clan or tribe named Africa. And more importantly, and this is where, I haven't been able, because of my, things that I'm working on, to get into some of these online dialogues, or if you want to call them debates on, oh, take the genetic test, you're not indigenous. But there is no African genetics. All right, so I got to prove this point. There is no African genetics. And let me show you why. Let me show you why. Let me show you why. If I can. If I haven't put this inside of, yeah, I have. All right. There is no African genetics. All right. So what you're looking at here is a whole bunch of haplogroups. These are male haplogroups. All right. And so you see the source here of the scientists who did it. I published this inside of my Melanin Encyclopedia. That's why you see this tag here. But these are different haplogroups. So let's take a West African, right? Might be a West African that has a certain haplogroup, right? Then let's take someone who's in East Africa, way down in Tanzania, Uganda, or somewhere. They do not have the same female or male haplogroups. They are not in the same clans or tribes, nor do they have the same nationality. So if they have, let's say one of them was E1B1A in West Africa, then let's say another one was A3 down in Uganda. They don't have the same haplogroups of genetics, all right? They don't have it. So what exactly is making them African? Uniformly across the board, if they have different lineal haplogroups on the male and female side. We haven't even gotten to the nuclear DNA, all right? The autosomal DNA. You say, oh, well, they have a common ancestor. They're going to throw this common ancestor curveball at you. Right? Now, where is the common ancestor and where is their genetics today? Because we're talking about today. And if you keep digging back and back and back, here's the question that I want to ask you. Here's the question that I want to. This is a genetic question, right? And I don't want to lose the audience. Since they say we're Homo sapiens, right? What was the first haplogroup of those Homo sapiens? What was it? Mitochondrial and Y haplotype. Because if they aren't that today, what is making them the same people? What is it? So, and this is no, hold on, let me come out. This is no knock on any particular group, but I asked this question to a Hebrew Israelite who I was debating, right? Like, what makes you a Hebrew Israelite? Like, what is it? Is it genetics? Is it who can be a Hebrew Israelite? Who cannot? Can somebody who is European be a Hebrew Israelite? They couldn't answer. Oh, Hebrew Israelite had to be descendants of Shem. How do you know whether you're a descendant of Shem? Did somebody take DNA from Shem and Ham? Like, did somebody do cross genetic studies with Ham and Shem? They couldn't answer that question. So the Afrocentric people used to laugh at, different people in the Hebrew Israelite community because they're saying, oh, we're not African, but then they can't tell you what makes them a Hebrew Israelite. Well, I'm asking the same question to the Afrocentrics. What makes you an African? All right. So now what I'm saying to you is the terms of identification they're pseudo. There's no African genetics. There is no African nationality. It doesn't exist. You can go to an isolated clan who has the same haplotypes and mitochondrial groups. Then you go to a clan a little bit further and they have a different one. Now, I'm not going to qualify what I'm about to say right now. All right. But genetics is not the best way to identify the broad spectrum of what unifies indigenous people globally. It is not the gene structures. It is biochemistry that will unify us over long distances. That's important. So if we want to have a Pan, I won't even use Pan because Pan is a Greek god. All right? It's a monkey. If we want to have a global, indigenous, aboriginal type of concept, you have different haplogroups and haplotypes, and food affects populations over longer periods of time who have been in there, and you just can't do that socially. All right? You can't do it. All right? And there's a lot of whole things to say about genetics, but there is no African genetics, there is no African nationality, there is no African clan. That needed to be said. All right, I can move on. Let's go on to the content of the information. All right, so now let's look at where this word comes from so we can end this myth and then we can move on. Yes, I will show my sources. Yes, for those who like to use, are they peer reviewed? We do know peer review can be used against us, but in this instance, let's see if we can solve this problem. All right, so this is a paper on the Berbers in the area that we know of as Africanus Proconsularis, or at that time, Africa, and we'll show you from the maps where that was physically, and then we will proceed on from. As a matter of fact, let me do that now. I don't want to let you get the geography messed up. I want you to see the geography, and then we can proceed on from the geography to a sound discussion on from where we are, who we're talking about. All right, because there's a lot of myths been put out there. Oh, we're named African because of the Afar people. That is a myth that was perpetuated by a famous Afrocentric scholar, two that I know of. And it became a myth and it carried on, And so that became a problem because there are no people in Africa who call themselves Afar. Keep it in mind, who call themselves Afar. That didn't happen. That doesn't exist. There are foreigners who named a East African group Afar. The Danakil is the indigenous name, and there are other tribes in that area in Djibouti. But there was an Arab chronologist who named that people that, and then the word wasn't even that what he named. All right. So they don't call themselves that. Let's stop lying on them. Let me show you where Africa was. Let's do that. All right. So here we go. This province in this area is what was called Africanus Proconsularis. It was preceded by Africa Nova and then Africa Vetus. And when Africa Vetus and Africa Nova were united, it created Africanus Proconsularis. All right. So you can see here, this is Africanus Proconsularis, and then we can read about it. All right. From this source, The Formation of Africa Proconsularis by Duncan Fishwick and Brent D. Shaw. All right. Modern scholarship has accepted the convenient date of 27 BC for the formation of a unified province of Africa under a proconsular governor. So this is the formation of Africanus Proconsularis. Prior to that, you have Africa Nova and Africa Vetus. And I'm going to show you that from another source. Evidence in support of this communist opinio turns out to be surprisingly slight. Of the two main literary passages usually called in aid of that, of a Dio refers explicitly only to the division of the provinces between Principes and Senate. And they put this in Greek, all right? It is true that Dio mentions Africa and Numidia separately. That's important because some people try to say that the Numidians own that area, right? Strictly speaking, he should have said Africa Vetus and Africa Nova. But if any significance is to be placed on this distinction per se, the proper conclusion is surely that the two provinces continue to be administered separately after 27 BC. For Dio is clearly listing the various provinces in terms appropriate to the period after the settlement of that year. For example, Baetia, the district of Taraco, Lusitania, and other ones. All that he is stating is in effect is simply and loosely that the whole Roman province was made a senatorial province in 27 BC. So you see that you had Africa Nova and Africa Vetus there, and were merged at this particular juncture, thus bringing Proconsularis. The reason why I'm showing you that is to show you the chronology, that it was two separate provinces, one Africa Nova, one Africa Vetus, and they were later brought together to be called Africanus Proconsularis. And these were Roman jurisdictions, all right? These were Roman jurisdictions. So now that you got a physical look at the geography, let's continue on with the meaning of the name, all right? We want to know, okay, where does this name come from? Was this named by indigenous people on the land? Or, you know, like they say, oh, this is from the Ifri or the Afir or the Afar. No, it was not. So this is my source. Let's read, all right? The good deal of interest has been aroused lately in scientific and religious quarters by the important discoveries and researches of Mr. Theodore Bent, Dr. Carl Peters, Professor Keene, and others, which go to identify Ophir and Havila with the gold-producing district of Mashonaland in South Africa. The name Ophir has been found in the Egyptian form Afor, and this latter, again, is taken to be the same as Afur, the root of the word Africa. There is no doubt that Africa is the feminine adjective derived from Afur, which occurs in the appellation of the Latin comedian Publius Terentius Afer, so called for his being a native of Tunis. Afer was Tunis. The Afrique province was strictly the present regency, and only in modern times has the local designation been applied to other parts and eventually to the whole continent. But whence came Afar, if Ophir and Afar came from it? I know of no other derivation of the term, so I venture to offer the following. The earliest inhabitants of Tunis were cave dwellers. Herodotus, in his second book, describes the customs and country of these troglodytes, such as they exist in the present day in the mountains on the Tunisian Tripolitan border. Now, the principal part of this cave dwelt chain is still called Jebel Yefrim or Jebel Ifrim, from the tribe of the Yefrim or Ephraim who inhabited. According to the Berber historian Ibn Khaldun, this tribe dwelt there from time immemorial, and he incidentally mentions that they derived their name from the Berber word Ifri, or in the feminine form Tifri, which signifies a cave. The translator of Ibn Khaldun, Baron McGuckin, this lane corroborates this by tracing the word Ifri to the Berber word Efer, to hide. So that's a variation of it. So they're saying that the word, that first of all, there are no Afri people in this area. So all of the people who have been saying, oh, that's from the Afri or the Afar, who are in Africanus Proconsuleris or this area of Tunis, there were no people that were called Afar in this area at all. The Berber root of the word means cave. Period. The end. When we go to the numismatics or to the actual coinage, we see this white goddess who is depicted on the back of coins as Africa. She was worshipped in an actual temple. Now, I'm not going to, let me show you, hold on, because I'm not going to let y'all get away. I'm not going to let y'all get away. I'm not speculating. This is the book right here. This is the book. All right. The North African Stones Speak. This book tells us what temple De Africa was worshipped in. It also tells us what other Roman gods were worshipped there. Serapis was worshipped in the same temple. All right. Saturn was worshipped in the same temple. These are not indigenous deities from this land. These are Greco-Roman deities who are venerated in a Roman territory by white people with their gods. They named a god Africa. All right. So look, I don't want to deal with belief, and I'm going to show you the page number. All right. So you can see, all right, look, you can see where I'm about to read from in this book. All right. So when I go back to the slide, that highlighted area right there, that's what I'm reading. All right. That's what I'm reading. All right. Aboriginal does not mean not original. How many times we have to go over this stuff? Oh God, we have. You know what? Y'all need to stop talking and go take some certifications or some linguistic classes or something, please, because then you'll learn prefixes, suffixes, root words, and their dimensional meanings. So you won't think in a linear fashion when it comes to linguistics and lexicology. The word ab has like 12 different meanings according to which language you're using it in. So you can use it as a negation. You can use it as a root word and as a suffix. So if I say absolute, it doesn't mean not salute. You follow me? So, you know, people just are talking. All right, let's get back. Sorry for these distractions, but I see stuff coming up in the chat and I like to address it quickly. All right, so let's go back to this goddess, Africa. All right, here we go. 400 meters south of the baths looms the great bulk of the Byzantine fort of 539. Byzantine means Roman, measuring 112 by 67 meters, the best and best preserved example of Byzantine architecture in North Africa. Its walls were 15 meters high and 2.5 meters thick. 7 of its 8 square towers doubled as storehouses. Oil and grain jars were found in them. And within the walls were symmetrical barracks along arcaded streets. Now, you need to understand, well, I'll explain what this is. A military temple. All right? And these were deities that soldiers venerated in their attack. This is Eurocentric divination. They have infused these entities with their will, if you want to say. All right? This is their divination. So every time you call on these deities, you're calling on them. All right. The commandments, baths, and a chapel. Beneath the Byzantine level was found a Severan sanctuary with embellishments dated by an inscription in 213. In it, 3 temples share a podium. There are 2 porticos and a marble-lined pool, 27 by 7 meters and 1.7 meters deep, with originally a bronze balustrade and a colonnaded garden. Colossal statues of who? Serapis. How many Afrocentrics we see going in on Serapis, 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 Serapis? You got Serapis right next to the goddess Africa, and you're worshiping one and you're saying the other one is Greco-Roman and European and we don't need it. All right? Saturn. All right? How many Afrocentric scholars that come for us? All your religions are ruled by Saturn. Saturn. You got Saturn right next to Africa. But they're African, but they're not worshiping the Saturn. You see how they lost their mind? The genocide is real. And dedications to Diana Augusta and to the Day Africa, the latter with an elephant mask, headdress, a military standard, a cornucopia, and a lion. Now, I can show you this same deity here in America, but she's given a different name. And she's in the city that was first used as the capital of the United States of America, right? Declaration of Independence and all of that. And when you go to these ancient buildings, even some of the modern ones, the municipal building, whatever, you'll see her name there, but they named her something else. All right. But suffice to say, right here in these temples in North Africa, you have the deity Africa. All right. You have the deity Africa. The deity Africa is a white woman, Roman goddess. And we can go on and on and on. How many times? This is Emperor Hadrian. The word Africa is white Roman colonizer terminology. All right. And so there's no use for the name. I don't, I'm not going to impose in different types of indigenous spiritual or religious standards on you. But traditionally in Africa, you have deities, right? Ancestors that are venerated. I'm not going to say whether that's correct or incorrect, but it's done. It's been done from time immemorial. I don't think that you can go amongst the Igbo, any clans amongst the Yoruba. You can't go into any of these systems and find a goddess named Africa. Can't find it. It's not indigenous. So now you have a whole continent of 55 nations that is named after a white woman, named after a term that means cave dweller, troglodyte, named after a jurisdiction that represents the conquering of Carthage, the indigenous people of that land. And you're trying to tell me that we who do that are exercising intelligence in so-called 2018 on the Roman calendar, 15,104 on the Aboriginal calendar. We are exercising intelligence. We consider ourselves scholars, right? Erudite scholars. It's madness. It shows the level of confusion, and it shows, rule one, we have not entered the realm of dealing with classification. If you're not going to deal with classification and standards that are parameters by how you describe in an indigenous format of how you unite around, you lost. All of that hoopla, lectures, online this, meeting of the masters, that ain't no masters in the room if everybody African. Now, most intelligent people on the continent know their clan and lineage, well off, whatever, have their nationalities all over their passport. So I'm not going to relegate the lack of intelligence there, but the leadership is corrupt because they will bring a union together and name it after a white Roman goddess, but they're worshiping white people. They are. The white people control their economics. They're afraid of them. They're afraid to unite. They're afraid to fight. Not necessarily the people, but the leadership who is corrupt, who's in bed with Europe. And so it's up to the people on the ground at any particular stance to change the corrupt oligarchy, whether it's a priesthood or a pantheon of senators or representatives, whoever they are. And at the top of so-called African American scholastics are a gentry of boule-fied Negroes who know what I'm saying. They already know it. They know the ramifications, but they're gatekeepers. I hate to say it like that. They're just gatekeepers. And they're not going to change. All right? They're not going to change. So let me show you some modern maps, because I did promise you that too. Let me show you some, well, not modern maps, but the maps that begin to be used to identify or use the word Africa. When did this happen? Because what happened is, after Rome was obliterated by the Muslims, all right, Rome and Persia, the Sassanids, then nobody was African. Nobody was African. All right. Islam spread over North Africa into West Africa, Central Africa, and then you had a Renaissance in Africa at first. And then you had the Arabs who later came in. I must emphasize that. That's a whole other discussion. But they came in and then they Arabized the Islam, and it just took another fold in the Saharan slave trade and the Indian slave trade, and eventually the African slave trade the slave trade in the transatlantic. And there's questions about that, right? About the nature of that. I'm not going into that, but it did happen in not in the way that it was described, but we know these things happen. And the point that I'm trying to make is that with that time period, nobody was being called African. Then the word crept back up again, right? So I'm going to show you when it crept back up again. Now, this is going to blow your mind. This is going to blow your mind, all right? But, all right, so the Royal African Society was in a slave trade, but, all right, let me pull up some of these maps where we have the word Africa in it. Just give me a moment. As a matter of fact, I'll just go to world maps and just give you the sources, all right, because I don't have these out. Give me 1 second. Early world maps, all right. Give me a sec. Trying to open my stuff. It's taking a long time. I have to go a different route. Open this stuff up. Give me a moment. Okay. Just give me a second, y'all. I'm just trying to pull it up. It takes a long time. All right. All right. So now, one of the things that you're going to have to get around is this idea of reconstruction of maps, because they'll tell you that the Greeks and so made a map, but we reconstructed it. All right. And it's BS. All right. So what I'm about to show you is allegedly a 1868 reconstruction. Excuse me, 1628. This map is from the year 1628. That's my point. That's just making it hard. Bring it in here. I don't mind bringing it in here like this. All right, let's do that. All right, let me show you this. The map is from 1628. It's claimed to be a reconstruction, which is not, from Pomponius Mela, who was a Greek. But even if Greco-Roman, even if it was, who cares? All right. You see that use of the term Africa. All right, here. But this is in 1628 that this map was allegedly reconstructed. Now, that timeline is very important. And here's why. The reason why the timeline is important is because for a long time period, our people were back in power. And then post the Columbus period and the Renaissance taking its course and, you know, the spice trade being effective, then you have this blast of knowledge back into Europe of its Roman antiquity. And so they started getting access to these things in universities that were popping up because some of our people were interfacing with them and educating them. It just happened. It was a peaceful interaction. All right. The Africans invaded Europe to create the Renaissance, and it was a peaceful invasion. Wasn't a lot of fighting, you know, during that time period. It was fighting earlier and later. But suffice it to say, these maps start popping up because they got back access to Roman documents that were kept. All right. And so they started using Roman terms in the mid to late 1600s to describe the continent. All right. And I showed you one map, and there's several maps. You can just go look up world maps, maps of the world, and it'll show you a chronology of the maps, who made the maps initially, when the reconstructions were done. And then by looking at it, you'll see, if you look at the time periods, like, oh, okay, this is when Europeans started getting their Roman and Greek knowledge back again. Because they had a wide gap where they didn't have that. All right. They were back in those caves. All right. Or the Black Plague and other things that were happening. They lost a lot of their information. So suffice it to say, they got the information back. Then they started calling us African. They started calling us, our people, African. Now, this is in line with them interfacing with Arabs and some Africans, all right, during what we're calling the slave trade. All right. And so one thing you have to realize is that in aristocracy, when they're putting together a plan, it's not plans like common people. There's a lot of psychological sorcery, if you want to use that word, that is put into keeping people enslaved. It's a must if you're aristocracy and you're going to do that to people. And so the terminology, the words, everything, this is well thought out. And so here we are today, living by these particular terms. All right. And these terms are not fitting of us. All right. And so I can't call groups who don't want to be called to the table to discuss naming that continent an indigenous name, but I can discuss it with people who do. And if we can come up with a common name, historical name, and even at our summit, we have a summit coming up. We do our annual Indigenous Summit in August. This year it's going to be again, here in Atlanta. And last year was our first year doing it in the South. This is our 9th annual Aboriginal Summit. And so that is something that we can table for discussion. It's August 3rd through the 5th. If you want to know information about that, go to aboriginalsummit.org. All right, I'll type it into the chat. But we're going to make that a highlighting point because we can all agree and we can come up with an indigenous name and say, this is what we're going to call it. And from now on, you're not going to use these terms of declassification when it comes to that. And then we have to deal with our own as well. All right. So let me stop talking because I can go for a long time, and I didn't want to go for a long time. I wanted to be brief, but I want to ask the crowd, do they want to ask any questions? All right. So here's what you can do. You can type the questions into the chat, and then I'll say the name of the person. Can we do it like that? Right, we can do it like that. Because if we don't, we have to share the link and then let people in and let them talk. Right? Yeah, we can let them just ask the questions in the chat. All right, and I'm going to stick to the subject because I know it's going to be I'm not going to suggest the term tonight. I was eager to, but I don't want to do that because, I got enough enemies. They're going to try to say I'm being a dictator. Did we come here on slave ships? No, we live here. None of us have ever been on a slave ship, meaning us. I've never been on no slave ship. All right. There are books that talk about a slave trade. Now, let me rewind because I got to do this. If y'all, first of all, some of y'all don't know me, right? Because I might look young. In 5 days, I'll be 43 years old, right? I was dealing with this in the 90s. It's what, 2018? Like, no disrespect to anybody, but all of these new and vibrant and intelligent scholars, whoever they may be, y'all was in grade school somewhere. All right. So I'm saying that to say, when it comes to the slave trade, when I wrote this book, I was the first person to say that the slave trade was not told to us in totality and that it started in reverse. All right. The lectures on YouTube, the information is published. All right. This book itself is 10 years old. And then the preceding book that I had before that is 14 years old. All right. And then the Freedom 101 information when we first published it is 19 years old. All right. So I've been saying that the slave trade happened in reverse for 19 years based on primary source documents. And the documents that I studied, which I knew I had to study, were the Spanish Jesuit letters. And they told very clearly that they were taking Negroes from the Americas back to Europe and points in Britain, Portugal, Spain, and even back to Africa. All right. So the slave trade, the first chapter is missing. And the first chapter is taking Negroes de Guine. All right. Excuse me, Negroes de Terra. Because when they wanted to talk about, let's use this term, black people, they said Negroes de Guine, they meaning the Spanish and Portuguese, when they were talking about Aboriginals from Africa. And when they were talking about true Aboriginals from America, they called us Negroes de Terra. And the Negroes de Terra were brought back to across the Atlantic the other way. There were no slaves coming from Africa or anywhere from that side first. And I detailed this in this book. All right? I detail it. So I know Dane and some of the other brothers and sisters are saying, oh, the slave trade happened in reverse. Y'all know y'all better give me y'all better cite y'all source. Don't play. All right? And so this is how it looks. You have to understand the impetus for, the true impetus for a slave trade, right? And what all right, so let me just use your common sense. If the Portuguese and Spanish were going to get slaves, and this is in the late 1300s, early 1400s, as far as the period, why didn't they just go to West Africa and get slaves and bring them over here? There were no people from West Africa in 1300s, 1400s, going up into the 1500s. They weren't bringing anybody from Africa here. Why? Why didn't they just go there and do that? Ask yourself that. Then go to Columbus's letters. And in Columbus's letters, what does he say? He's saying that there are two enemies, right? The princes in the West who have a king called Khan, Khan, which is the term of one of the designations for a she king. All right. And then you have the Moors, who he just mentioned the Moors outrightly in his letters. So you have these two groups of people who Columbus is focusing on. But here's the question. Since Columbus had never been to America at that point, how did he know the name of the rulers? First of all, you need to get some literature or get the primary documents to see what inspired Columbus to go to America. In 1477, he met with natives who were stranded in that part of the world. And they gave him the information of how to get there. So a lot of people, oh, he had Moors on his ships. All right. You can't prove that. All right. You have the name of families, but you can't prove that those people were who you're saying they are. But the point is, he got information from indigenous people here. And that's been put in several different books. All right. And so you can look that information up. I cited in my materials and the sources. And so the slave trade started by Portuguese and Spanish coming into the Americas to take Negroes de Terra back to Europe. Thousands of them. Back to Spain. Thousands of them. And even some back to Africa. Thousands of them. That's the first chapter. But they could not keep that up. It was not successful enough because of the indigenous militaries that were here. This is, if you study how long it took to them to get colonies set up. They started coming in the 1400s and 1500s. They couldn't get colonies until almost 200 years later, 180 years later. And those colonies were very small. It was because of the militaries. And so there was a West African slave trade. It happened. It did not, it did not happen in any way. And there's missing elements to it. There were people from Senegambia who were being brought into the islands, into Charleston, into Louisiana. That did happen. All right. The totals, the maximum totals for the amount of slaves from West Africa that were brought to the United States is 425,000. And I would argue with that. And I would also argue that some of those people who were brought were not all African. Some of those people who were brought, and you have to get the book, Christian Slaves, Muslim Masters, by Robert Davies. Some of the people who were brought into slavery were European. Moulay Ismail in Morocco had thousands. This is an African had thousands of European slaves. All right? That's the purpose for the fighting of the Barbary Wars in 1803 with Thomas Jefferson. They wanted to stop this. That was the purpose for the treaties that they made with Algiers, Morocco, that's the United States, and then Great Britain in 1752. They were making treaties because they were being enslaved in Africa, in North Africa, Northwest Africa, and Northwest Africa. It happened. And so there were Europeans being brought here. The Royal African Company, who was interfacing primarily with Mamlaka al-Maghrib, what became Morocco, were not just bringing melanated slaves here. Some of them were of European stock who were in Africa. All right, and we've been talking about that for years, but people, they don't want to talk about that because they think they're looking at this the wrong way. All right, when they start thinking about restoration and reparations, they're missing a whole chapter of their Aboriginal heritage that they know nothing about, and now they're trying to use paleontology, genetics, and evolution to protect them. It's not. It's listen. This is a boulder, a huge one, the biggest one that you could think. This is the Aboriginal boulder, and it's rolling down Mount Kilimanjaro and the Appalachians and every other mountain that you could think of, and you're not going to stop it. They've been suppressing it enough. All right. I have too many books, too much literature, paid too many thousands of dollars for books out of the Smithsonian from the vaults and other places, and put the stuff in my book, stuff that you never saw before. You can't get around it. They're trying hard as they can, but they can't get around it. All right? They can't get around it. And so all I'm saying is that I proved my point. I gave you sources for the etymology of the word Ifri, Afar, whatever, all those terms, showed you where the jurisdictions were, showed you what the Berbers, in their language, what the words meant, showed you the coinage from the Romans, showed you the goddess, what temple and who she was being worshipped with. What more do you need to see? All right. And so for those of you who want to keep bickering with your brothers and sisters, I'm not going to bicker with them, because I see it like this. There is a domestic, and it's just like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. There's this domestic movement that's surging here, and it's going to spread globally. We have a global problem with indigenous people being invaded by non-indigenous people. That's a global problem. We have our own domestic issues here to deal with, but it starts out with what? Re-education. We have to be the publishers of our own materials so that we can tell our story. We have to pay, how much money do you think I paid for these books? I didn't get this book from America. All right. This book right here I had to order this book from South America. All right. I'll close on this point. Trust in your indigenous records, because they are very, 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 very scientific if looked at properly. In the American traditions, in the African traditions, and in the Asian traditions or Indic Vedic traditions, they all talk about the mutation of humans away from their original form into the different classifications of primates. And we all had words for these animals. But our records show that most of the larger primates, their origin is not what they're saying. There is no archaic Neanderthal. There is no archaic Denisovan. There is no archaic DNA. These creatures are not older than us. All right. Not only can we prove that through the highest level of dating testing methods, all right, and biochemistry, all right. Let's just take, for example, potassium argon dating is used, and there's other radio decay measures that you can use it today. But potassium beta decays into argon at a certain rate over a certain amount of time. But all the decay is based on the state of the magnetic field. Why do you think the she, Olmec Maya, had so many discussions and depictions and even tools, the first compasses, all right, and so many things aligned to magnetic north and the poles. There's so much discuss because they studied the magnetic field, all right. And so I'm saying that to say that when there were collapses in the magnetic field at certain places due to certain cataclysms, we recorded those events, and the people who were in those areas who were impacted, the rate of decay of substances in their body is inaccurately being measured. And so it takes scientists to go through that. That's a very heavy subject, but I'm trying to get to the point. And the point is this. See, Europeans are smart. And they know you're not going to trust in your indigenous tradition because they made it taboo. But let's take evolutionary biology for a second. Dr. Keith Chung, who is a doctor in cancer research, but he studies mutations because you have to do that to study cancer. But basically, he'll tell you in some of his videos that there was no pale race until around 10,000 to 6,000 years ago. None of the races were pale. That's what he'll tell you, right? Some type of mutation happened, and only East Africans out of the deeply melanated people have this. West Africans don't. All right, that's key. All right. So that mutation happened, right? But then Savante Pablo, all right, he will tell you that Neanderthals passed down autosomal DNA that proves that they had lank hair and pale skin. But then they tell you that Neanderthals are older than Homo sapiens. Then they tell you that the common ancestor, which they don't know of yet, between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, had to have pale skin, and that the carbon-based, deeply eumelanated skin is a mutation of pale skin to adapt to the climate of equatorial and subtropical and tropical UVB radiation. So what they're saying is melanin is actually a cancer. This is standard evolutionary biology. So now they're saying that not only did we mutate to pale skin then, but pale skin was the original, right? That's what they're telling you in evolutionary biology. Now, all of the Afrocentric people who follow the rules of evolutionary biology have to follow the fact that white people are saying we have between 4% Neanderthal DNA. We are labeling it archaic DNA. And so essentially what we're telling you is that the white man is the original man. I'm going to rewind that so you can catch it. They're telling you that Neanderthals are older than Homo sapiens. How do I know what they're doing? All right, so somebody could come to me that has a skin disorder. Let's call it solar urticaria, all right, where they go out in the sun and they get burned, right? And this person could consider themselves African American. But what I know is that in their lineage somewhere, most likely their patrilineage, they have a white male ancestor, right? Who, from their father, who passed down a mutation of something called actinic keratosis. Actinic keratosis. Actinic keratosis is only found, as far as old DNA, in Neanderthals. Neanderthals have specific autosomal mutations that they have passed down to Europeans, and because of our admixture with them, mating with them, we are getting those mutated chromosomes and we are diseased. So, one of the things that dummies who are studying genetics don't know is that genetic adaptation and genetic mutation are not the same thing. Genetic mutation is handing down a weakened chromatin or chromosomes. That's disease. So when you look at these Neanderthals and the Denisovans, they're only diseased humans that mutated. But now they're trying to say that we have a common ancestor with them, but they're older than us, and that their pale skin is the origin, and then it mutated into black skin, and then, like, yo, this stuff is ridiculous. I'm not going to go into that. I'm going to do a separate lecture on genetics. And y'all can't prove genetically that y'all are aboriginals. Oh, absolutely we can. I'm going to say that again. Absolutely we can. All right? And I'm going to prove that you know nothing about genetics. First of all, anybody who doesn't know biochemistry can't come to talk to you about genetics. And even if they're repeating something from a geneticist, they better have within that, they better have the composite study to produce for you. All right, because there are things that they're missing in that study. All right, and so I'm done. I've said everything I need to say tonight. I don't want to overwork you with concepts, but to my Afrocentric brothers who are out there, you're trying to defend a fallen paradigm. Yes, there are great indigenous civilizations on that continent. And some of us have ancestry tied to peoples in Senegambia and other places. Some of you who are Aboriginal, we ain't got no African, or, you know, y'all both crazy. Neither one of y'all are making sense. All right. There was a slave trade, but it was not what they described it as. And some of you have corresponding gene pools. The issue becomes, how did who get what? All right. It's my position that the American civilizations are older. And you can argue with me all day on that. But I'll just fire out more and more literature, sources, and data, and to show what they've been suppressing. All right. And so, yeah. He said Ali Muhammad was the first person on the House of... I was the first person on the House of Consciousness. Yo, check this out. And this is historic, and I can prove it because we got the lectures. When I came on the House of Consciousness, I was the principal of a school for 3-year-olds to 17-year-olds, Muhammad's Islamic Academy, 26 and Cecil B. Moore. Nobody was on the House of Consciousness but me. And then other people came. They were upset then. This is 12 years ago. That when I came on, the first thing that was talked about on the House of Consciousness was the indigenous paradigm. Go back and get the lectures. When I talked about African history, I talked about a lot of different things. But the concepts I'm talking about right now, I was talking about then, and they was mad at me then. None of y'all existed. All y'all popular on the Aboriginal, y'all didn't exist. And so it was the work that we put in that has fueled y'all to be able to go forth or whatever, do what you got to do, which is cool. We need more people doing the research. All right. All right, so I'm done for the night, family. I don't even see I don't. Nobody's asking questions. Y'all just talking. Yeah. All right. So I think I'm done. I don't see any questions. Hmm. I see something on rhDNA. All right. So that's a myth. The original people have Rh positive, and the non-original people usually have Rh negative. How do I know? Because back in 2001, when we were first young and immature with presenting the information, we presented it wrong. And so some of the people are still presenting that wrong information. We corrected that years ago. The Rh antigen should not be named Rh. It deals with membrane immunity. All right, immunoglobulins. And so if most of the Aboriginals here in the Americas and West Africans have Rh positive. And it's because we have more extenuated gene pool within that measurable thing that you're measuring, the molecular protein matrix that you're measuring, and that anybody who has Rh negative is missing those. And so, they're going to have slight immune issues. So that's the whole subject. Maybe we can cover it one day. Talk about blacks in Arabia. What about blacks in Arabia? I don't know what you want me to talk about. There are people with very deeply hued skin in Arabia. All right. But just because they have deeply hued skin does not mean that they're your direct ancestors. That's the issue. And see, those Afrocentrics are getting y'all on that because, we need to improve our research. But remember, phenotype is ruled by genotype. And so I heard someone say, oh, you can't use the eyeball test. Oh, yes, you can. In some instances, you can use the eyeball test. For instance, there are depictions in She glyphs, so-called Mayan glyphs, that show cranial deformation that was only done in Africa and America. All right. And so if you get an Olmec skull, right, that matches a skull from Central or West Africa, then all you need to know is what genes give rise to that phenotype. Because now you have to explain something. All right. How did this skull get in the Americas? And now who has tested the genes for that skull? There's a large suppression by the Max Planck Institute not to do archaeogenetic testing on certain things in America, or if they do, to suppress the primary research. All right. So that's the genetics is a whole nother discussion. Not what you said a year ago. Who, me? Not what I said a year ago. And did I change something what I said a year ago? All right, I'm not sure. What books do you know to find out what happened to the Indian slaves in Europe? I'm not sure what you're asking. What happened to them? Like, did they die? Did they die off from the people who were taken back to Europe? No, they didn't die off. They kept populations of people there. Some of the blacks who came from Europe were descendants of those people. There was no such thing as Pangea. Pangea is fake. Well, it's not fake. I shouldn't say that. Pangea is misunderstood. All right. So a planet is not born with tectonic plates. All right. Tectonic plates. This is according to our ancestors. Tectonic plates on this planet came about from a war, cataclysm, and so Pangea was the post climate of that war, and we have the maps to prove what we're saying. Right. The oldest maps are in South America, and I put those in my book. That's why I showed you this book. They're in here. All right. And there's a reason why Africa and South America fit like that, but it has nothing to do with only Pangea per se. All right. There's a whole other continent that was missing in the Pacific. And this is standard literature. You can just Google 8th continent found by geologists and see the current data that they're trying to say, or they're depicting about the Pacific Ocean and there being a sunken continent in that area. All right. So that would take more study. I run my own university online, Aboriginal University. How about that? How about that? Since y'all so into indigenous institutions, yeah, I went to European institutions, but I don't talk about it. I'm not interested in talking about it. Of course, they had Ankh slandering me and saying, "Oh, you got a fake degree. You got a fake degree." Anybody who would have paid $27 could have went on and searched that information. But I run my own online university. Been running it for a long time. I'm not young like some of y'all. You know what I mean? Some of y'all are just wet behind the ears and y'all just getting consciousness or whatever. Like, I've been around a long time. All right. All right, so some people, you see, y'all have to be better researchers. You know, years ago, when I was talking about this 8th continent, the Afrocentric people, they used to tease and laugh, right? They used to tease and laugh, right? This was before the data was being put out by these scientists. I was using indigenous records to deal with this, but I'll just go here. I'll go right to it. I got to show y'all this stuff because some of y'all are behind. Y'all behind on information. All right, so this article is from 2017. Let me show it to you. Get out of here. They got so many advertisements on here. All right, let me show you. When these people come at you, see these people. You know who I'm talking about. Y'all know what I'm talking about. All right, here we go right here. Earth Has a Hidden Continent by Tia Goes, senior writer, Live Science. All right. Based on geological definitions of a continent, the Earth actually has a lost 8th continent known as Zealandia. Most of the continent is submerged beneath the sea, with a tiny sliver, including New Zealand, is above the water. All right. And these are geologists doing this study. Earth has 8 continents, and world map should reflect this, geologists say. Not Ali says, because I'm not a geologist. All right. The 8th, a lost continent called Zealandia, which they named, isn't a huge landmass that geographers have somehow missed. All right. Rather, only small bits, including New Zealand, New Caledonia, and a few other specks of land in the vast Pacific Ocean, that's where it is, are now above sea level. The rest of the continent lies beneath the waves, a new study suggests. Did I not, years ago, when I was going to debate Sarah Sutton, say that this is before these geologists brought this out. They brought this out in 2017. I was talking about this stuff almost, what, 10 years ago? But I was using indigenous records. This is why I keep telling you to trust in indigenous records. I hope Zealandia will now start to appear on world maps which show other continents, said Nick Mortimer, a geologist with GNS Science in Dunedin, New Zealand. All right, so listen, this stuff is there. Just go research this article. This is the Pacific Ocean. I was dealing with this stuff years ago. And there's more, there's actual papers. That's an article, of course. You can cite the geologists, go and see the papers that they've written on these particular things, and do your research. You should have Rh positive. Tony, Rh positive is the dominant genetic factor when it comes to the membrane oriented immunity on the red blood cell. All right. Well, I mean, if you think that the Washita are the oldest people, and that's what they call themselves, then you're welcome to think that. I know that's not true. The oldest people in North America call themselves the She. And they have that word, Uach Atun, in their language. All right. And I can show you the monument that they put it on and where they put it on. All right. It's in the lower part of North America, of course, but it's still North America. You're supposed to be O positive. You need to cite your sources before you put out that type of information. I'm not sure what type of information you're referring to. Oh, you talking about the She? Oh, that's easy. That's easy. I put that in all my books. They didn't call themselves the Washita. Those were sunburnt Mexicans. Oh God, y'all crazy, man. How do you spell She? You're dealing with transliteration, so it doesn't matter how you say it in another language. You just use whatever consonants and vowels you can to make the sound. No one has rules on transliteration. We're writing in Phoenician script, but they weren't Phoenician. All right. So if you want to get any books, let me just lay that out. Governmentreparations.org, www.Aboriginal Medical Association. I wanted to keep this short so people won't think it's too long. All right. Plenty of people form societies and use the term African. That's what they were taught. Oh man, y'all crazy. Hey, let me say this, man. Y'all folk online, y'all need some psychological help, man. I don't know what's going on in your personal life that makes y'all come online and say the stuff that y'all say, but y'all are wild. But I still love y'all. You know what I mean? All right. So I know sometimes when people you come online, they have like they want you to explain everything that has nothing to do with the subject. Um, but I haven't been online, of course, because I'm too busy doing other stuff. But I'll come back. I'll make myself more available. I do have a set of lectures, and you know, those of you on social media, different types, you'll see the flyers or whatever. But I do want to cover these points and cover them in great detail, so at least we will have, you know, some stances on these particular things. And you know, that's it. You know, I think that you should not get me confused with other people who represent the Aboriginal paradigm or other people who have love for indigenous indigenous traditions that come off of the continent that we are calling Africa. Don't get me confused with those people. I'm not at war with either side. You know what I mean? I'm here to present information. And so if you get me confused with them, you'll start, the angle of your questions will be based on what beefs y'all been having online. I'm not in those beefs. All right. And so, you know, I want to stay out of that. Oh man. Bruh, I'm not interested in coming to no cold, nitrogen driven, chaotic northern city to argue with my brothers and sisters who are sick because they're living in a high nitrogen fixation environment. If you understand, you take my classes amongst mutants, and the only thing that they want to do is argue with each other. Like, I'm not interested. I got too many things to do in my life. All right, that's why y'all don't see me online. But if y'all want to do that, y'all welcome to do that. Y'all be arguing on YouTube, and y'all be 70 years old arguing on YouTube. I'm not trying to do that. I want to share some information with some people who want to make moves, and then we can make moves. So the last things that I want to share with you, so you can stay abreast. Because this deals with real action, and I'm not into all the other stuff that other people are into. All right. All right. So if you're interested in some of the stuff that we deal with, right? Then you can tune in. Let's see. All right, just let me share the websites with you, at least, so you can know how to stay in contact with us. All right, so indigenouspoliticalauthority.org. You can go here. You can become a member of the IPA. All right. The IPA stands for Indigenous Political Authority. The IPP stands for Indigenous Political Party. We are interested in uniting our people into a block election format to affect local and national politics. And we're also interested in you becoming a member of the IPA so that you could be a part of our international lawsuit and international reparative actions for indigenous peoples here on this landmass. This is a plebiscite. I was the first person amongst our people to actually form an international plebiscite, even though others were working on it. All right. And others have them now. And I even teach people how to form plebiscites. All right. You can go to this page and learn all about the international lawsuit. You can learn about membership in the political party, what the agenda is, all of that. All right. If we want to deal with political science and socio-political activity, we must deal with it from an indigenous standpoint, and we can deal with it in a very effective way, like other people have done to get what they want out of politics and political structures, as long as we keep our autonomous side autonomous and deal with the other political sides, the other political aspects of what we deal with ourselves amongst ourselves. The other website is the Aboriginal Medical Association website. All right. We service all indigenous peoples for any types of maladies that you can think of. All right. Whether they be acute illness that is said to be incurable or not. We also train our own indigenous medical doctors. All right. We have certifications and degree programs in the indigenous medicinal sciences. And we farmed last year in the South. All right. And we're doing our fundraiser for our farm this year. You can go to this page, aboriginalmedicalassociation.com, and you can see the work that we put in last year and what we're trying to buy and purchase this year. We're trying to buy 9 acres. We worked 3 of these acres last year. All right. This is just some of the facilities that we worked on. All right. So this is the farm that we farmed last year, and we want you to support. We need the people to help us out because that's the best business paradigm so that we don't get ourselves in debt, and we can have up to 18 staff actually, if we can raise the funds going forward through October. So this is a farm that I actually worked on. And so this is not one of those situations where somebody's coming before you and making a promise and then not delivering. All right. Whether y'all or the community supports me or not, I'm going to make this happen and produce food, produce what I do now, natural medicines, and teach agriculture to our people. All right, teach indigenous agriculture so we can grow the right types of plants and foods, etc. And for those of you who are interested in ARNA and the IPA on a greater level, you can go to governmentreparations.org. You might want to register a business, and LegalZoom is too high, and you want to start an LLC or holding company or trust or whatever. You can register businesses here. You can purchase our books here. All right. You can go to the store and you can purchase our books, whether they be electronic books, all of our books are there, or whether they be hard copies of actual books, you can get them here. All right. And all types of other services. We even teach economic courses that deal with helping you with IRS debt, student loan debt, building your business portfolio, improving your credit, establishing business credit, etc. All right. And so if you're interested in any of those, you can go to those websites and you can get that information. All right. All right. All right. So we are on Solution and Remedy, and I'll take that from the commenters. I thank y'all for taking the time out for listening tonight. Hopefully I haven't said anything that offended anyone. If I did say something that offended you, it was not intentional. It was only my attempt to deliver upon the subject, and the subject is what it was, about the origin of the word Africa and the history of that term, and about classification and the practicality of us naming ourselves, classifying ourselves, and dealing with our own identity. All right. All right. So I'm done tonight. Thank you for your time tonight. And hopefully you enjoyed the lecture, share the lecture with those who might be interested in this subject. And we will be back this week for more discussion on separate subjects other than what we discussed tonight. Peace, family.